Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sembiam Rangarajan, Chair of the USNC-URSI. On behalf of USNC-URSI, I welcome you all to this mentoring session. Let me give you some background on USNC-URSI and NRSM. Founded in 1919, the International Union of Radio Science, or URSI for short, coordinates studies, research, applications, scientific exchange, and communications in all fields of radio science. USNC-URSI is the US National Committee of URSI. It is appointed by US National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. USNC-URSI encourages studies in radio science and provides a forum for disseminating research findings. The National Radio Science Meeting is our annual meeting organized in early January in Boulder, Colorado every year. This year we are holding it virtually. NRSM is perhaps the most student-friendly conference you'll ever find. We typically award travel support to 100 student authors for a total of $60,000 every year. 1/3 of all papers in NRSM are presented by students. USNC-URSI also provides support to students and young scientists to present their research in URSI General Assembly and Scientific Symposia. Students, you may become early career members of USNC-URSI commissions and get involved with technical and business activities of USNC-URSI. Ask your faculty advisor, any commission chair, or the USNC-URSI officers about the application process. USNC-URSI has been organizing student mentoring luncheons since 2018. Sorry, we cannot offer lunch this year, but we have put together an outstanding panel. The plenary speakers you just heard. I want to thank Anna Ferreras, Mike Newkirk, Christina Paterina, Colin Mahoney, Michelle Ambrose, and other CU Conference Services staff for their help in organizing this event. Let me introduce Charles Baylis from Baylor University, who has been a phenomenal moderator of this event for the past 3 years. Charles, take it from here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sembiam, and I want to thank Sembiam and all the organizers of this meeting for allowing me the chance to moderate this panel. And I want to introduce our panelists to you as well. Just a couple of notes for the meeting in general. If everybody could stay muted, that would be great. If you have a question during the panel session, please raise your hand in Zoom, and we will try to, I'll recognize you to ask your question. However, and I love to do this in my classes, if you are able to show your picture, please do so. It just makes it more of a conversational feel rather than a lecture. I see Nader nodding his head, and in a session like this, it'll really help us just to be able to feel like we're talking to somebody. And this will be kind of conversationally oriented, so please participate in that way if you wouldn't mind. Now I'd like to briefly introduce the panel. Many of you saw them already in the previous session as they were our plenary speakers. By the way, I'm Charlie Baylis. I'm a professor at Baylor University of Electrical and Computer Engineering, and that's my brief background. I'd like to introduce Alessandra Corsi, who is our third plenary speaker. She's an associate professor with a President's Excellence in Research Professorship in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Texas Tech University. She received her laureate in physics in 2003 and her PhD in astronomy in 2007 from the University of Rome Sapienza, and carried out postdoctoral research at various institutions, including Penn State University and the California Institute of Technology. I'm just going to kind of describe each of our panelists and their employment histories. They have some fairly extensive bios, as each of them is very distinguished, and you can read those on the website. Linda Katehi is Distinguished TES Chair Professor at Texas A&M University in the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department. And Professor Katehi has quite an illustrious career. Before moving to Texas A&M, served as the Chancellor and Distinguished Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at UC Davis. And previous to that was the Provost at University of Illinois, Previous to that was the Dean of Engineering at Purdue University and Distinguished Professor of Electrical Engineering. And prior to that was at the University of Michigan. Now, something you may not know is my privilege today to be able to mentor this panel or to moderate this panel, because Professor Katehi is my advisor's advisor, which makes her my academic grandparent. And so my students are attending this session, and she will be your academic great-grandparent, which is quite phenomenal. Finally, I would like to introduce Nader Engheta. Did I pronounce your name right, Nader? Please correct me on this.
Yes, you did. Nader Engheta.
Engheta, okay, great, thank you. He is the H. Nedwell Ramsey Professor at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. He was born in Iran and received his bachelor's from the University of Tehran, came to the US in 1978 and obtained his master's and PhD degrees from Caltech. Then after spending 1 year as a postdoc in Caltech and 4 years at a research company in Santa Monica, he joined the University of Pennsylvania, where he has been ever since. So very interesting. Professor Engheta has both industry and academic background. I think that provides a diversity of perspectives for the students today. So this is going to be a session where I'm going to, yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know, I apologize. Professor Katehi sent a message. She'll be about 10 minutes late, so she'll be late joining us.
Okay, that's good to know, and we'll integrate her into the questions when she's able to arrive. Does that sound like a good plan?
That's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so how we'll do this, everyone, is I'm going to start with a couple warm-up questions for this panel, and as I mentioned, we really wanted to vote. We've got about I believe, what time does our session end? It ends at 1:10 Mountain. Is that correct, Mike? I believe that's correct. So assuming that I'm not corrected on that, we got some time, and I really just want to open this up. Mentoring is an interesting thing. My thought on mentoring is you're probably involved in mentoring in some way, whether you're here today and you're a student attendee, and you're probably looking for mentors and folks to guide you into your career and professional decisions. And today you may come with a lot of questions in your mind that are career oriented and development oriented as kind of a mentee. And then there are others here today that may be on the mentoring side of things, that may be helping to guide younger employees or students. And I think everyone here today has an interesting perspective on that and probably some interesting questions. And we welcome questions from all sectors here today. So I'm going to ask a couple warm-up questions to our panel. And panel, if you'd like to answer, just start answering the question. You don't have to answer each question, but if you have a particular interest in answering these questions, please feel free to speak up. So let me start with some of these questions. First of all, before I start with the question, I just wondered if I could ask each panelist to just briefly introduce themselves, talk about what you're doing in your current role, if you don't mind. Alessandra, I'll let you go first. Would you like to just briefly describe what you're doing in your current role at Texas Tech?
Yes, hi. Currently, I'm an associate professor at Texas Tech. So I study mostly exploding dying stars. And I have a group mostly of grad students and undergraduate students right now working with me.
Great. And Nader?
First of all, thank you so much, Charlie. And it's great to see everybody here interested in mentoring. Yeah, I'm a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. My primary department is electrical and systems engineering, but I have also affiliation in Department of Bioengineering, material science and engineering, and physics and astronomy because of the research that we do in my group. In my group, we are interested in various aspects of physics and engineering of waves and how to actually manipulate waves. And that, by that I mean particularly electromagnetic and optical waves with very unusual materials in order to do interesting functionality for waves. That takes us to different interesting directions, that will go into devices as well as also biology of visual systems. That's one of the areas also that I've been interested in looking at the optics of the eyes and some of the animal species that can see polarization of light, whereas the human eyes cannot see. But also from the plenary talk I gave this morning, we are interested in metamaterials to see how we can manipulate waves to do interesting things.
Yes, that was a very interesting talk. I learned a lot from that. Thank you for that. So, first question I have for you, and you can feel free to answer however you feel comfortable. How did you choose your career path?
Alessandra, would you like to go first?
Yes, sure. So for me, it was an inspiring math and physics female teacher in 4th year of high school. So that's when I decided I wanted to be an astrophysicist. I had other ideas before, but that's pretty much it. Then I went and asked my dad, so if I want to study the stars, what do I need to do? What do I need to study at university? And so he told me physics. You know, in Rome University, we don't have a separate astronomy and physics department. So I went and looked at what course they offered, and it all started from there.
So is your father also in the same field as you?
No, he's a chemist, and I thought he'd always think of me like, oh, the black sheep in the family, because my mother is a biologist, my dad is a chemist, my sister's a chemist. And instead, he was enthusiastic when I told him I wanted to study stars. So it went well.
Okay. Very interesting. Nader, how about you?
Well, for me, I started when I was in high school. I was always interested to learn how things work. So naturally, I was interested in physics. But one day, I remember, I don't know which class I was at that time, but it was during the high school. One of my older brothers, you know, was working on a transistor radio. I mean, I'm talking about 1960s and so on. And so I was looking over his shoulder, and I was fascinated that how this gadget works. It's not connected to an outlet. And somehow, you know, some interesting music is coming out of it. So I asked him, I said, you know, how does this work? I mean, where does these things come from? And he said, well, there is a very special type of waves that goes from the radio station to this gadget, and we don't see that waves. And that's how it works. And I became fascinated, you know, by this concept of waves. And I asked him, you know, if I'm interested, if I want to go into this field, what should I do? What field, what topic should I study? And this was at the time I was in Iran. As you mentioned, I was born and raised there. And he said, if you want to study this, go to electrical engineering. Now, it's interesting, at that time, if you wanted to actually become a scientist in Iran, you would go to actually engineering school rather than to go to the physics and chemistry. At the time, you know, engineering school was the one that you wanted to do science, you would go there. And that's how it started. So I went to University of Tehran, you know, Department of Electrical Engineering, and then the rest is history. I'm here today.
Those are great stories. It's interesting how each of you were inspired in high school. And a lot of our students here are probably beyond that path, but, you know, I know that others get inspired later, but this is incredible. So what are some actions that you took to prepare for your current role once you got the inspiration to head in the direction that you did?
I guess in my case is learning how to be persistent. That was, you know, a thing that I learned going through the path of, you know, trying to build my career. I think it was a learning process. And the other thing, I think also trying to consciously enjoy the path towards your goal, because they don't always go the way you think they'll go. And so I thought that always, you know, go smoothly, from taking a PhD in Rome, Italy, where I was born, to maybe, you know, having a career there as a researcher. And then I ended up bouncing around the two coasts of the United States, and I'm very happy now, but it wasn't how I expected it. So I had to learn how to enjoy the path, and then also be persistent. And even when not everything goes as you think it should go, learn that it might actually go better. So have that open mind.
Well, that's an interesting path. It is interesting how life sometimes takes you different directions than you expect, and being able to make the most of those opportunities and enjoy them, that's really, I think, a great piece of advice. Nader, what are some actions that you took?
Yeah, I completely agree with Alessandra. I mean, it's something that, you know, you can never predict, you know, what happens. So enjoy the process and the process of learning. And I think, you know, to get into, let's say, in this case, I was fascinated by waves, and I've been working in the fields of waves, for almost, 40 years, and every day I'm more fascinated about it. So, and to do that, one way is that to try to learn the foundations of this, obviously mathematics, physics, signal processing, all of those things that's come with it, but also the curiosity-driven aspect. And probably we can talk more about this as we go into specific, career path, is that, I'm fascinated to ask curiosity-driven questions to see what would happen if I assume this? What would happen if I assume that? At the beginning, not having any specific application in mind, just for the pure curiosity of the things. And you saw, by the way, in Alessandra's talk, I mean, that's really a great example, of curiosity-driven work that, you try to find something that, really curious, and to do all the fascinating work that she was showing in her talk. By the way, that was a great talk, Alessandra. That was fascinating.
Thanks so much. I loved yours.
Thank you. And yes, I mean, the fact is that you enjoy the process of learning and appreciate, every step of it towards the goal, but also the process is important. That's also part of that. And things may happen that you did not expect, but in everything, even an unexpected one, you learn from it. If it's positive, certainly that would be great. If it's negative, you learn from it, and we all learn from our mistakes, and we move forward.
Yeah, I like this idea you mentioned of curiosity. Why do you think curiosity is such an important ingredient as a driver of direction?
Because, the science, in my opinion, science and technology and engineering is based on curiosity. I mean, many fields of science actually started, with curiosity. If you look at, for example, Max Planck, and how he looked at, black body radiations and why, the process is like that. That curiosity-driven question actually led to the field of quantum mechanics and the various aspects of this. Or if you go back to the 19th century, Faraday's, for example, I am always fascinated by Michael Faraday, and when I teach electromagnetics in my class, I also tell them about the history of these people, because it's fascinating, because these are, obviously these people, were geniuses at the time, but also they were human beings. They had their own challenges and struggles and so on. And so curiosity-driven, have really propelled, science and engineering. And usually this being connected to application later on, not necessarily at the beginning. And we can talk about specific examples as you want, but I always encourage my students to be courageous in asking curiosity-driven questions. Whether it comes with an application or not, in my opinion, that comes next. But inevitably, this actually will lead to application later on.
Wow, that's really good, and I think that's a good theme for us to all remember. All right, I'll turn a little bit of a corner here in my next question. What was the importance of mentors in your development, and how have experiences with your own mentors affected your approach to mentoring others? Maybe take that one at a time. What has been the importance of mentors in your development would be my first question I'd like you all to tackle.
So in my case, I can say it was huge. The nice thing about it was that the people that helped me the most weren't necessarily formally assigned mentors. Sometimes we get that, we either work with an advisor, or even later in the career, if you continue on your path when you're assistant professor, you get assigned some mentors. What for me was most useful was to develop a networking such that I could pick or adopt my own mentors. That's how I like to say it. So I was lucky enough to meet some people who were helpful without being assigned the task of being mentors for me. And so I just went on and considered them as my mentors, and very often referred to them for advice. And I think so that role for me has been critical, I would say.
You bring up something I think that's really important for us all to realize as we look for those people that can help us. There really has to be a personality match in a sense that it's a cohesive mentoring relationship. And I think a lot of times, I know for young faculty, universities will make these assignments where they assign you a mentor, and it may or may not be a good fit. And I think you bring up something. I mean, would you agree that it's really important to find mentors that you can relate to, that you can relate with, and that you look up to? I mean, I guess is
yeah,
a thought.
yeah, and at the student level too. I wish I'd done it earlier. I was a lot more shy, so I took some time. But I think the sooner you start, the better. And the nice thing is usually when you go and ask for advice, people will help you. Then you can evaluate whether you want to follow that advice or not. But it's just the opportunity of hearing different advice is what makes it really useful, or made it for me at least.
Yeah, for me, by the way, yes, obviously the mentors played a very important role, in my way of thinking, in my career. And I can point specifically to the PhD advisor I had at Caltech when I was a student there. He was Professor Charles Pappas, and I'm very much indebted to him for he was a fascinating man, wonderful scientist, and great human being. Not only I learned from him, foundations of electromagnetism, but also I learned from him how to do science, by the way. I mean, how to actually the process of science. And he was an amazing human being. Unfortunately, he passed away in the year 2007. He had a wonderful career. And he was always, a role model for me, and continues to be, even though he's not around. But I always cherish, the memory and the items I learned from him. And yes, so that played a very important role in the way I look at, science, in the way I do science, and the learning about this stuff.
That kind of, I'm going to take a little bit of a rabbit trail. I kind of like this because we have a little more time than we typically would. But what if there's a student out there that has a question, how do I pick a faculty advisor for my graduate degrees? What would you tell them would be a good process to go through in selecting the advisor that's right for them?
So in my opinion, what I would do is talk to everyone first. Go and talk to, all of the faculty, and then talk to the students that are with them to see what is the feeling, what is the atmosphere. That's what I would do. Never, it might be that one of the faculty is not available as advisor, but he or she might become, if you actually go there and say, really seeking for some advice, and then, that person might take on that role. So I would say don't choose blindly. And having the sense of what atmosphere is in the group of that person, I think is one of the most important things.
I agree. I completely agree with what Alessandra mentioned, but let me add more to that as well. The interaction between the supervisor and the students and all together as a whole, as a holistic approach is very important. After all, the advisor and group are all colleagues together. Maybe some have more experience and some less, but all together they have to be treated as equal colleagues and interaction among them. But in addition to that, also the type of projects that you would like to do, it should be something that you will be in love with. I mean, that's very important. I mean, it's and it can vary from group to group. The style of the work can vary from group to group. And I'm not saying one would be better than the other. It's just different. And you have to see how your interests match with that. And I'm not talking specifically about project A or project B, but the style of the project is that and in choosing your group and advisor, in addition to what Alessandro said, which I completely agree, also the type of research that you will be in love with. I mean, in my opinion, you should choose the topic of your research, something that you really love to do. I mean, not just because that group has an opening and you just join that group just simply because the group has an opening. Choose the group that you feel comfortable in and you will be in love with the subject, and it's consistent with your way of like to do things. I think that's very important factor as well.
These are great pieces of advice. These are questions that, you know, I get a lot from students in my classes, or at least even questions that they don't know they're asking, and I can see they're asking them. So I really appreciate you answering these, because I think they're probably in the minds of many people here. So now that you're both faculty members at universities, and you both, I think, have tenure, given the ranks that you have, how do you continue as someone who's at the top of their field? How do you continue to benefit from the experiences and expertise of others to grow professionally and personally?
Okay.
So from my perspective, there's two things. One is now that I am in the role of advising students, is you feel a commitment to their success, which becomes priority. And then the motivation that comes from that is really inspiring. So before, you know, when you're at a younger stage, you focus on reaching your primary goals in terms of your research, making sure you're laying out a successful path in your career and everything. Now it shifts. Now it goes to the success of those around you, and that's how you measure every day. Am I successful or not? And so that is what at least you know, makes me get out of bed. And then there are older these mentors that we're talking about. Also, there's people in you know, more developed paths in their career that are still inspirational for me. And of course, then to relate to what was said, is the passion for what you do. That is a driver. Always, there's no end in that. No matter, it doesn't matter what stage of their career you are. You know, that motivation of wanting to discover and learn more, that I think will always be there, regardless of career stage.
Welcome, Professor Katehi. I just want to jump in and
Yeah.
welcome. Just feel free to jump in and answering these questions. I'm asking some questions now, and we'll be taking them from the audience momentarily. I was telling the other panelists, feel free to speak up when you feel like you have an answer and you want to talk to a question. If you don't want to speak to a question, that's fine too. It's kind
that's
of
fine. I will listen a little bit. I know that Nader wanted to say something. So.
No, thank you. No, I just wanted to say that our friend Linda joined us, so that really happy.
Okay,
So
yes,
just to follow up with Alessandra, I think regardless of what stage of career you are, whether you're at the beginning of your career or you're more established and senior, the passion for what you do should stay there. I mean, that's the thing. And that's why, you know, it's important, you know, to expand your interest, to expand it, to learn other things, to go into new fields, to keep that passion going. That's extremely important. And as Alessandro mentioned also, as you become more senior, of course, it's also the excitement of seeing, you know, the members of your group become successful. That's one of the greatest gifts, by the way, that we see, you know, our PhD students, you know, graduate and postdocs, you know, becoming their own leaders, you know, in the field, and they have their own, you know, independent groups and so on. And that's the greatest gift. And when you see, you know, that thing happened, it's just so satisfying and rewarding. And that actually also encourages us to bring, you know, new students, have, you know, more interesting, you know, research projects and expand it. So I think, as I've said, you know, many times to my friend and colleague, we are really lucky to be in a profession that we do what we do. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, sometimes we are so into it that we don't think about it. But if you think about it, every day we wake up in the morning, actually we do what we love to do. I mean, and yes, it requires a lot of work. Yes, it's extremely busy work, but we love what we do. And that actually can be conveyed to the members of the group, and that sense of excitement is contagious, and it goes to the group, and then that will excite, you know, the other.
Yes, I can add to this that what excites me, first of all, faculty or individuals, professionals in our areas go through different phases, obviously, in their career and their life. And there are obviously circumstances or interests that may drive you one direction or another. But the fundamental to keep in mind in all of this is what drives each one of us. And then to keep that flame alive, you know, in whatever you select to do. So for me, for example, what excites me is when I do things where I learn. And that has been very specific in my career, because the moment I feel that I know enough, I'm gonna leave that area. So I've never done the same thing. I mean, this is me. Other people, I'm saying, so each person needs to find to understand what excites this person, what helps them wake up in the morning and be anxious to start. So what I always try to do things where I would learn something. And when I felt that I knew enough, then I wanted to make a change. So here is the difficulty that many of us also face, that making a change later in your career is not easy, because your momentum drives you into one direction, your students, your funding, but your interest may point into a different direction. And I think that's where you need to show courage, you know, to be able to take the direction that drives you in that moment in time. And for me, that's what I always try to do. And even now, the fact that it took me, when I decided to go into this area, it took me 4 years, you know, and it's only this year that my students and I have submitted 2 papers on the work that we are doing. 4 years for me to learn and feel comfortable with the literature in areas that I had not studied before. And I decided to do it. And I'm so glad, you know, because there is a point in our career we all worry about, you know, of course, when you're early, you're going to publish, you're going to have students and the whole thing. At some point then later in your life, I was thinking, one more paper is not going to do any good to me. And definitely it's not going to do any good to my soul, you know, in an area that I'm not that excited about. So I decided that it's okay if I don't have any papers for a couple of years. And that's what I did. Now I can afford it now. I could not afford this when I was an assistant or an associate professor and a young full professor. But at this point of my career, I am so excited. I have to tell you what I'm learning. I swear to God, I wake up in the morning and then I go to sleep and I'm thinking about it, about the problems that I have to solve. And that's what drives me. That's what makes me happy.
Well, I think we're hearing a theme here, aren't we? of excitement and curiosity driving us. And I think, you know, students, I mean, we're hearing it from everyone, you know, that you want to find that place in your career path where you're driven. I'd like to open it up to the floor now for a few questions. I have some more, but I want to hear from others that are here. So please don't be shy. If you have a question, raise your hand. I already see one. Arash, would you please unmute yourself and ask?
Hello. It's really nice to be here and ask questions and talk to Dr. Engheta, Dr. Katehi, and Corsi. So I have a question from Dr. Engheta, actually.
Okay.
My question is about his turning point in career, where he switched from like industry to an academic job. Currently, I'm a like 3rd-year PhD student in electrical engineering and astronomy. And at some point, I need to think about my future career very, very soon. And I need to start thinking about it, actually. So I was wondering what happened that you changed from industry to academy? And if you go back, do you still want to have the experience of working in industry, or would you go directly to academic job?
Thank you, Arash. It's good to see you. Linda said it very nicely. You know, for every case is different. Every one of us will have different career path, and that's okay. So one doesn't have to follow any specific, you know, path. You will choose your path, I'm sure. And so it turns out, by the way, in my case, it turns out that at the beginning, I went to industry for 4 years. And after I got my PhD, I stayed 1 more year as a postdoc, you know, at Caltech. And then I went to industry for 4 years. And then I went to academic, you know, University of Pennsylvania, and I've been there since then. I learned a lot, by the way. It's in my experience in industry. If I were to do it again, it's very hard to rewind the history. I mean, it's this was, you know, at the time you went there, so your experience would be different than if you want to go now. And but my philosophy in any situation, even though it may not be your ideal, I mean, goal, what you have at that moment, you can learn from it. And as Alessandra also mentioned, you know, sometimes in the career path, you move around, you know, not necessarily in the direct path going from A to B. You know, you have to go to C and then from C go to B. I mean, this happens, you know, often. So, so yes, that was indeed the case. You know, I work in industry, and then whenever the opportunity came that I could go into academic environment, I did that. And but I learned a lot in those 4 years. And in fact, you know, it was very interesting because later on, as a professor, those experiences that I had from industry actually was quite helpful. And in fact, the friendship I made, and I still, you know, stay in touch and friend with those scientists in that company. And yes, so you choose your own path, but the main principle is at every path you learn what you have, and then you go towards your final goal. As I said, sometimes you may have to take a detour, but you will get there.
So do you suggest for like having an industrial experience, or I know it's a very like it's very specific to each individual, but in general, would you suggest such an experience to have such an experience in the industry?
I think experience is always useful. It depends what your field is also. I mean, I cannot make a general statement about every field. It depends on your field. Some fields, you know, benefit more from industrial experience than others. So I would say, again, I'm not familiar with your area of interest of your research, but if your area of interest is such that can benefit from experience in industry, certainly that would be an added advantage. But of course, by the way, every scenario of career has their own advantages and constraints. For example, I mean, if the industry is such that you cannot publish, for example, that would put, you know, certain, you know, constraint there. So again, it varies from case to case, and you need to consider that. But you know, if you like, we can talk further on, you know, offline. If you have a specific question about your specific interest, I can give you my suggestions.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'd be curious, this is a great question. I think it's one a lot of students grapple with. You know, do we get industry experience first if we eventually want to go to academia? Do we spend a few years in industry to go directly to academia? I'd be curious to know, Alessandra and Linda, your thoughts on this as well, you know, from your perspectives.
From my perspective, I don't have experience personally, but one thing I have noticed is that we definitely did have students that in our PhD program who went for a couple of years in industry and then came back. The one thing I noticed is that usually, at least for this specific cases, they were very mature. So, you know, when they came back, they were pretty strong, and the approach they had in research was perhaps more mature for the year they were in as PhD students. So I don't, if that is, you know, a path where life brings you, or something you want to experience at least for a few years, I don't think it should necessarily, that someone should necessarily feel trapped in it and then that you have to stay there all your life. But again, I say it from indirectly observing And so I had a couple of examples where, in other words, those students came back into the academic sector and they were great. So, you know, I wouldn't have any prejudice because of that, or say that necessarily one has to stick to one single path and know what that path is right away. Not necessarily.
I would agree with this too. I went to work for industry before I went to graduate school. And I worked for 2.5 years because I had no interest in graduate school when I finished from undergraduate studies. I had no idea why I would need to do that in the first place. And then after I worked for 2.5 years, I realized how little I knew. And that gave me a lot of, gave me energy and excitement to go back to graduate school, which I did. Then a lot of students are asking whether it's better to go through industry or through academia. There are no indications that one or another gives you a benefit. Usually you have to ask yourself, which one would you prefer? You always ask yourself, which of the two will make you happier? Because if you're happy, then you will do great things. If you don't like what you're doing, and if you are not happy with what you're doing, then I can tell you that your progress is not going to be very good. And I would probably not look for money. I would not ask the question, what is going to happen? Because nobody can predict what is going to happen. The only thing I can tell you is that if you do well, wherever you go, then the future will belong to you. But if you go to a place that makes you unhappy or does not make you creative, then does not matter how much money you make or whether you live in a nice place or not, geographically speaking. I think professionally, you will suffer from that. That's my advice.
Thank you.
May
That's
I ask
excellent. Go ahead,
a follow-up
Arash.
question? Yeah, sorry.
Yes, please.
So, thank you. It was a great suggestion and advice. So my next question is actually very related to what Dr. Katehi, if I pronounce it correctly, said. So I, as a PhD student, actually Dr. Baylis talked about academic grandfather, grandfather, or grandparents. And as a PhD student, I sometimes feel like since my academic father or advisor is doing great, is this wonderful person, I have to pay back somehow to this area, to this, have like mentor PhD students or pay back to the scientific field that I am right now. And I feel like going into industry will prevent me from doing that. And I have that feeling that I need to somehow pay back. Is that a sane or correct feeling to have about my scientific field and my advisor? Do I have to somehow pay back to the community that I am right now learning a lot, and they are forming my future career somehow? And how can I, if I go to industry, do I have the opportunity to help? Or again, I use the verb pay back what they have done for me?
Well, the best way to pay back is by excelling, by doing well, wherever you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By being happy with what you're doing.
Yes.
And contributing regardless of where you are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you, as Linda said it very nicely, if you are happy with what you do, and if you love what you're doing, you'll contribute a lot, regardless of whether you are in an academic environment or industrial environment. So that is the key. So choose the part that makes you happy, mm-hmm. and you love what you do.
And I have to say that because that's something I've learned over time. Do not focus on achieving or like getting titles or something. Those should not be your target. Those will be the outcomes that will come with your success. focus on doing great work, focus on learning something new, on discovering something new, creating new pathways for other people. That will eventually bring everything else. But don't focus and say, oh, my goal is to become a member of the academy. That's not a goal. I mean, there are great people who are not members of the academy, and there are people who do not have a Nobel Prize. I mean, if you say my goal is to go for a Nobel Prize, that's not a goal. This is an outcome that may happen, and take it as a gift. Your goal will be to do amazing work and to be proud of the work that you have produced. And if that your goal is, then I think you will do extremely well. Everything else is going to come. The reason I'm saying that is because when I was young, when I started as an assistant professor, I went to my department head and I say, tell me what I have to do to be successful. He said, well, you have to do well. I said, no, tell me. Papers, money. I mean, I did not have any other. It was very difficult for me to understand at that moment in time what the expectations were and what I need to do. He said, my department head said, Professor Bhattacharya, I don't know, because Bhattacharya, Palab we are great friends, but he had just moved to the University of Michigan. He said, Professor Bhattacharya is an excellent faculty member. Go and speak with him. I went to him. I went to his office with the same question. Say, Palab, I heard that you are an excellent faculty member. Tell me what I have to do to be the same. He said, do your work well. That's all. That's what he said. And in some ways he said that, but I think a lot of us focus on getting specific outcomes. And that's not what drives excellence, really. If the outcomes are superficial, like a title is a superficial outcome. A recognition is a superficial outcome. I mean, it should not be a goal, it's like a byproduct. Your goals should be different than just a position, a title, money, or a particular place in your society, all right? I think your goal should be to do good, to do it with high quality, and to like it, to feel happy where you are, and then everything else is gonna come. Because a lot of young people do focus on that. I see a lot of our students who come and say, how can I make a lot of money? And I was thinking, don't get a PhD if you wanna get a lot of money. Just go and do something else, Don't focus on that. I mean, I know money is important, but with an education that you've had or you're gonna have, money is not gonna be an issue. And so I just talk about this because I have heard so many people who worry about that more than they worry about the work that they do.
Linda is absolutely right. If I may follow Linda with your comment, I received very similar comment and advice from the dean who hired me at the University of Pennsylvania. Just as a fresh assistant professor, I came, and his name was Professor Joe Bordoni. Unfortunately, he passed away last year. Okay. He told me this exactly, almost word to word, exactly what Professor Palab Bhattacharya told you. He said, do what you love to do.
Yeah.
He says, we hired you because we would like you to be successful in what you like to do. So do what you love to do, the rest will follow.
Yeah.
And that was great advice. And, I'm always thankful to him for giving us the freedom to do what we wanted to do. I mean, that's wonderful.
Yes, I see you have a question. Oh, go ahead, Linda.
No, I had once a very smart student, PhD, not my student, somebody else who came and said, I want to be a CEO of a company. What should I do? I said, that's the wrong question you're asking me. That's what I told her. I said, it may happen, but tell me what else you're gonna do that is important to you right now. But I think today's pressures, especially with the younger generation, it's like the environment, they're forcing you to focus on immaterial things that eventually may not make you successful, you know. So anyway, that.
Vignesh, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead if you would.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for organizing this, this initiative. It's so nice to get advices from such established members and having the opportunity to just speak with them freely. I think I have a little philosophical question. I have two questions. One is more philosophical in the sense that it's a follow-up to Arash's question. I agree that you should do what you love to do, right? But then what if you don't have industry experience at all? Like for me, I came right from my bachelor's, I joined master's, I finished my PhD, and now I'm a postdoc, right? So there's no industry experience in between. I like what I do, I love what I do, but I just don't have the experience of the industry to know whether I would like that better. So in this case, how would you advise going ahead, going forward when I don't know, when I don't know the other side of the, the side of the field? And I have a second question, which is not related, but I think it's still an important question for, for us, is how do you manage your personal life and your professional life in academia when things are so open? There are obviously no fixed working hours. We are sometimes working through the night. Sometimes you're sleeping through the day and working through the night. It all depends on how situation evolves. So how do you get this balance once you start a family and once you have kids? Like, how do you balance everything? Yeah, those are my two questions. Thank you so much.
So I had a baby when I was a graduate student. My husband and I met very young, so we were married when we started graduate school. So our son was born when we were graduate students. And then I had a daughter when I was an assistant professor. So anything, if you ask anybody, will tell you that is the kiss of death, to your career. I have to tell you, for me, I liked what I was doing. So when I was working, I was happy that I was working. And when I was at home with the kids, I was happy that I was at home with the kids. And then I had enough energy. I would put the kids to sleep at 9 p.m. I will tell them that I will not turn off the lights, but the only deal is that they do not get off their beds. So at 9 o'clock, they're on their beds. So I could work. And I would work from 9 p.m. until in the morning. But I have to say, a lot of times, that's what I said, it's so important to like what you're doing. I could not do that if I did not like what I was doing. Period. That's what I said, that I would not be able to do that. And I enjoyed, and there were, the weekends I spent the time, a lot of times I was taking them to my office because, we did not have internet in the late 80s.
Yes.
So I had to go to the office to work. And a lot of times I was getting the kids, and there were other faculty who were bringing their babies, and they were playing in the corridor. And we were working in our offices, but it's, I enjoy doing both. That's what I'm saying. You need to like what you're doing. You cannot compromise and do well. And if you like your work and hopefully you like your family, all right, you start a family because you want to have a family and kids. I never felt that I had to compromise anything, to tell you the truth. I never felt that I was constrained, My husband was tremendous help, as many fathers are in today's environment. But if you think when it started, because for me it was when I was pregnant with our daughter, we did not even have at the University of Michigan, we did not have family leave. It's good that our daughter was born in the summer. Otherwise, I would have to take time off at no pay. But things have changed. There are wonderful conditions for parents now. And it's possible if you like it. I I was ready. Every Monday morning, I was saying, thank God I'm in my office.
So, Linda, you were saying, thank God it's Monday.
Yes, thank God it's Monday, right? Exactly. I swear to God. And the weekends I love being with the family, you know.
Yeah, by the way, yes, just to add to that, it's very important, by the way, Vignesh, to have a time management, as Linda mentioned, to really have a balance between your family and personal life and your professional life. Both of them are equally important. And if you have a time management, which we all need to have, that you can do it. Linda said it very nicely. There is no one is not compromised on the other one. Both of them are necessary. Both of them are there, and both of them actually reinforce each other.
Yes, yes.
I mean, that's very important. I mean, obviously, liking what you do and also having a happy family. You know, all of them go together. So I think it's very important. You had other question, by the way, with regard to not having experience getting into industry and so on. Well, I mean, there are ways that you can gain that experience. First of all, by talking to people who maybe a couple of years ahead of you, more senior to you, what their experience had been. But of course, experience is always personal. I mean, until you are in that position, you cannot really generalize somebody else's experience and reflect it on your experience. But sometimes, I mean, you need just to go and do it and see what happens. I mean, you cannot actually predict and plan everything to the 100% to the point. I mean, you just have some time to take risk and do that. And when you do it, I mean, again, you're at the beginning of your career. You go to industry, you gain experience, you like it, you will continue. If you find out that you prefer to actually change your career path, then you have plenty of time to do that. So that combination would be possible.
So from my perspective, I just wanted to add, I have for the life, family, work balance, I have a more recent experience. We right now have a 16-month-old, you know, at home with a pandemic. So our house has become daycare office, and then it's a classroom, and then I'm not sure what else, but it's a lot of things. And so what I wanted to say is sometimes for me, for example, while I was going through the tenure track process, it felt like how can I even do this? How will it be possible to find time and so on? And then you reach a point where you feel, you know, there's certain family life balance, several things that you want, and you feel will just, you know, make you as happy as your work that you need. And when that happens, you find the time in a way that it is imaginable to you now. Like for the way you're reasoning now, it seems no, impossible, but don't reason that way. As Linda was saying, you will find the time and the energy to do that in ways that you cannot even imagine right now. And so it's a real pleasure because you find yourself that you haven't sacrificed one for the other. If you feel that is the right time to do it, whenever that is for you, you should go for it, because as it has been said repeatedly, what makes you happy will make you successful. It's that balance that has to be there. You don't want to sacrifice anything of what you like for one aspect of your life, because then you'll always regret what you haven't done.
I agree.
That's exactly right. And as Alessandra mentioned, actually, you will become more efficient. I mean, if you do it right.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, really, I mean, when you do it, that proper balance and have a great family, you know, interaction and so on, that makes you, you know, more motivated, and you become more. I mean.
No, absolutely. Human capacity is an amazing thing. That's what I have to say. I mean.
It's beyond your imagination right now. You simply can't see it until you go through it, but you'll do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great questions, Vignesh.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Other questions, please raise your hand and we'll recognize you. Prabhat, I see you have a question. Please unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, thanks for the hosting this you know, this very informative session. So I have a question regarding the So I'm an early career researcher, and then I'm trying to get into, my first tenure track, faculty position. Do you have any experience to share for like, to make yourself kind of stand out from the crowd, so to speak, or to, get your first, faculty position, so that you can do the things that you love to do. And, when you don't have the track record, to go off of. So that's my question. Maybe you can share some experience that the whole panel had, getting their first faculty position.
Well, again, it's you're not referring. Let me clarify. I thought at the beginning you were referring to this year particularly because of COVID aspect, or no? You're talking about in general.
In general, yeah. And then COVID has definitely made it harder this year. Yeah. So, yep.
Yeah. No, I think it's again, the important thing is that you need to know what you want. I mean, that's problem number one. And what is your area of interest? What is your vision in what you need to do? I mean, usually, when we interview faculty, one of the questions I always ask the faculty candidate, early career faculty candidate, I ask this: how do you see yourself 5 years from now? Give me your vision. Right now, you know what you want to do. Okay, so that you know what project you want to do, let's say, if you get hired this year. But how do you envision yourself 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What kind of career you would like to have? Describe that for me. In my opinion, that tells a lot about what vision the early career has, because it's not just specific project that you are interested. It's not like, topological photonics or, machine learning and so on, because the fields evolve. Science and engineering fields are always changing. But what's important is that your motivation, your curiosity, your passion. When we hire faculty, we would like to hire someone that would be passionate about what he or she does for the next 40 years. Not just for the next year or next 2 years, next 40 years. So of course, one cannot predict, what happens, to anybody, in the future, but you would like to actually have that vision in you. And of course, based on what you have done, obviously what your past experience is important, but also it's important how you project your vision to the future. I think, in my opinion, that would be one of the interesting points to consider when you actually look for any job, but particularly also faculty position.
I think, you're right, Nader. Search committees and such can really distinguish between candidates who have a vision and those that don't, that are just trying to get a job and trying to go somewhere. That's a great point. Other comments from the panel.
Yeah, I also would say, when you present your work, especially when you're younger, you tend to focus a lot on a lot of details. And so sometimes you're kind of too focused on that. But from the perspective of the people who are there to hire you, a question that you want to ask yourself is, if I ask someone, what am I known for right now? Even at your early career stage, what is the one thing you have done which distinguishes you from others in terms of your work? Then that's a good way that can guide you then to present it and to put it into perspective. So not focusing, sometimes we see, and it's natural to be very, very focused on what you're doing when you're that young, but to try to develop, like, as it was said, have a vision for where you're going. And if someone asks anyone, so what's this guy doing? They can say it in 1 or 2 sentences and know who you are. And the way you do that is, keeping the good work up. Keep the work that you think it's most promising. And then the way to present it as a 5 years or 40 years plan will come.
So I have to say, with me, how it started is when I graduated with my PhD, I went directly to the University of Michigan. My vision was kind of narrow because there were so many things I did not know, to tell you the truth. I mean, usually during your PhD or like a postdoc, a little less, but the same, you are very focused in one particular problem. And depending on how the group is, what kind of options you are given to go to conferences at the time, I don't know how it was with Nader at Caltech, but at UCLA, when I was a student, late 70s, early 80s, students were not going to conferences.
No.
Yeah, nobody would pay you anything to go to a conference. So we did not have access to what students have access to today, which like all of these webinars and things that you can learn about where things go. So my personal area vision was kind of narrow. And I think it was during my time as an assistant professor and then going to associate where my vision became much broader. So if you cannot see very far away, don't worry about it. On one thing, you know, as a graduate student, I was terrified by how many things I did not know, to tell you the truth, because I was telling everybody that the only thing that I know is how much I do not know. And I don't know whether that's very helpful to me. That's how I felt. And then you go from there. For universities, that's my other thing. Don't go to a university if you don't like to teach, because teaching in a university is very important. In fact, I found that I love undergraduate students. The only classes that I have been teaching since I became a full professor are undergraduates. I enjoy it. I mean, you have an opportunity to make them who they are after this. I love my graduate students, obviously, but in terms of teaching is a big part of the university life. And that's another thing, you know, if you don't feel that you enjoy teaching, you may want to consider it. There are other positions for research where you can focus only on that. But other than this, yeah, it's narrow. When universities recruit, they prefer young people, obviously, unless they target senior people for specific areas. But why is it that universities prefer young people? Because you recruit somebody for the next 30 years, all right? You want somebody who is new and is gonna go into new directions, because for many senior people, it's very difficult to really go into something totally new. How you promote yourself and your interest. If you are interested in a university and you know that, then try to be flexible in other things. You cannot, you know, decide, I want to live in X, Y, and Z geographically speaking area. I want to do X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to find a faculty position. The more you narrow your options, the more difficult it's going to be. So if you want to become a faculty member, be open to go wherever you find a position. Otherwise, you know, think it differently. That's the other thing. And you know well what you do, being able to express it well so people understand what you're doing. Writing well is very important. And explaining why you want to become a faculty member. People are very interested in knowing, why do you want to come to a university to become a faculty and do this work? Why is that your choice? If you cannot answer this question to yourself successfully, then you are not ready to look for a position like that. But if you are ready, think about it, write it down. A lot of your institutions are asking people to write their thoughts about what they would like to do in education, and teaching in the classroom is one thing. There are tremendous opportunities for innovation in education, especially today. So think about it. Why do you want to teach students? Why do you want to make them? I mean, you have an opportunity to make people in to teach them during a very critical formative part of their life. So why is this important to you? I mean, these are important questions other than your research, obviously. And, you know, and then you look for it. Like you looked for a university for your graduate studies. When you look up for something and you find where you want to go.
Great
Thank you.
thoughts. I have a, go ahead,
Mhm.
Prabhat, did you have a follow-on?
No, I was just listening, trying to absorb as much as I could, you know, all the suggestions. So, yeah.
There is a follow-on here in the chat from Demetrius
Yeah.
Fazoukas to everyone. And it says, perhaps a more targeted question, any opinion or advice on how the academic job market is or will be affected this year, assuming the 2020 situation? Anybody have any feelings on that? You know, how is the academic job market going to be affected, or how is it? We're well into the search cycle. So the question is, how is it being affected?
Yeah, I was not hearing anything back from the, you know, from a lot of that. So I actually have the same question. Yeah.
This year is a difficult year.
Exactly.
Obviously, by the end of 2021 and within 2022, the positions will open up. Universities need faculty retire. You know, at some point, you cannot stop faculty from retiring, and that is happening. And universities have needs. And yes, because of COVID and everything, a lot of things have slowed down, which means that after 2021, there is going to be there will be many openings in universities, I believe, because now it's like you are suppressing that need artificially.
That's right. That's very true. I agree with Linda. As many of us know, by the way, in the spring of 2020, when this COVID hit, many of the searches that were going on, and in fact, some of the candidates even interviewed, you know, to this one, basically everything was frozen.
Yes.
And universities stopped hiring, by the way, because obviously the universities were in lockdown, to say the least. And that effect, it can also come into this year, although of course some universities have already, you know, resumption of the open and things. But the fact that, you know, candidates may not be able to physically actually visit the university and so on, so that can actually affect some of the recruitment. But as Linda mentioned, when we go towards the end of 2021 and into 2022, the things will open. Hopefully when the COVID is, you know, is subsided and vaccine gets to everyone, so then this can get back to normal. Yeah, this year is last year and this year would be kind of, you know, exceptional years.
Thank you, everyone, for answering my questions. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Prabhat and Demetrius. Other questions from the audience? Please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Vignesh, do you have another question? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So another question is, what do you think, you know, makes a student ready to get a PhD? You know, because I've seen situations and I've experienced it somewhat where you keep working and there's no end to your work, right? There's always things to be done further than what you've done. You know, there's always a possibility of publishing 2 more papers. There's always a possibility that you measure something better or you build something better. Where do you, as experienced faculty and, you know, renowned figures in the field, draw the line to say somebody, hey, you know, this is good enough for you to get a PhD degree? Like, I know it's going to be a very personal call, but just an idea of, you know, what we look for.
So for me, it is not something like numbers of papers, numbers of proposal or anything. There's a stage in my experience, which is, you know, I'm only associate professor, so it's not that long, but where you see the student make that independent shift in that project, that independent progress that makes all of a sudden a huge difference in terms of results where he or she was going. That's where I feel they're ready to get a PhD. In other words, is when you notice they change from kind of following what you give the lead on and executing and so on into being independent researchers. There's that shift, and it's typically very evident to me when they're enough into that project and they come to me one morning and say, oh, I thought of this and found this solution. And it is something which I did not tell them to do exactly. And that for me is the turning point. And then how many papers, how many this and that, it's not really as important because it's the one fact that in general makes the case very strong in front of a committee when I can point out to one or more of these specific moments in their path.
Yeah, I mean, I can also add to that. Yeah, I mean, you would know, by the way, as you said, of course, the process of research always goes on. I mean, there's never an end point in a sense, but you can actually see what milestone the students have achieved in terms of, independence in thinking, as Alessandra mentioned, but also in terms of the milestone of that particular project that he or she is working on. And then as an advisor and together with the students decide, is this the right point that you can basically wrap up the PhD or not? And then the decision can be made at that point.
Great. Other questions? Prabhat, I see your hand up. Are you trying to ask a question, or is it you just?
No, it's just a bug. I think it's the states.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, several. Okay, Tianlin, would you ask your question?
Okay. So firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for these great advices. So my question is upon the graduation from a PhD program and shifting to a postdoc position or any position, and after that you want to get into the academia. So what's the key things you need to do to become an independent researcher? As a student, I can do well being mentored, but how to be a successful people who can mentor others? How to get this confidence and get prepared? Thank you.
Great question. The transition from being mentored to being a mentor.
I can say I remember that. My first graduate student had almost the same age with me.
That's right.
So, I mean, I freaked out in the beginning a little bit of what I was going to give this student to do, because I knew exactly what I was doing. I was doing a lot of work, follow-up work for my research. But with the first graduate student, usually it works out. It is also helpful to know what you want to do before you go to the university, not really to discover it there. And my advisor helped me do that. I mean, he kept asking me, he gave me some ideas too. He said, you can do this or you can do that and so forth. I mean, he prepared me. So when I went to the university, I was able to write a proposal the first fall. And because I had already some ideas about what I wanted to do. So the challenge is to learn how to start letting the student do the things that you could do yourself. All right, because it's easier for you at that point in time to do the work instead of teaching your student to do the work. And so in the beginning, you work with the student like you are colleagues. Usually the first graduate students are very similar in age in many ways. And so you work like colleagues until you get the second student and so forth. And then you develop more experience over time anyways. And it's a process. It's not something that at least I was not a postdoc in the first place. I think as postdocs, depending on what postdoc position you have, whenever I had postdocs in my group, I would ask them to supervise some graduate students. So they had an opportunity to practice that. and to write some proposals with me, obviously, but they had the opportunity to practice that before they went out. I did not have that opportunity, so I've learned, during the first year.
Thank you.
Great. Are there any other thoughts on that question from the panel?
I think I agree. It's a process that you learn. It might be useful as a PhD student in case if you get the opportunity to supervise undergraduate student research projects. That can give you a little flavor, and it's usually rather useful. So if you have that opportunity, I would say take it on. And it's a good thing to have also in your CV.
That's right. And also as a postdoc, I mean, that's one of the reasons that, postdoc years become also important in that regard, because it is that transition that you go from being PhD student to being, independent faculty member on your own, to have your own group. So that it's a transition, and again varies, from field to field, from topic to topic. But yes, that transition happened, and it doesn't happen, in one day. I mean, it takes time.
No.
That's it. And that's going from one direction to the other direction.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, great question, Tianlin. Thank you. Alai Sadat, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Alessandra Corsi. I'm a PhD student at UIC. Nice to meet you all. And I would like to thank the speakers, especially for their very helpful tips. I have one question, and it's that, have you ever failed, and how did you manage your failure? For example, one example would help.
I'm sorry, how did you manage?
Have you failed? And how did you...
Have you ever failed in your career, and how did you manage that failure, if you had ever failed?
I can answer. You fail and you succeed all the time. It's a mix. One example I can certainly bring up is the experience when you become a faculty member, but even at the postdoc level in, failure with proposals. Proposals are vital, when you're in the tenure track position, and they don't always get approved. In fact, the first time I applied, I got one, and the one I cared the most got turned down. And then I reapplied, and then it got turned down. And then the third thing I got was great and beyond anything I expected. So how do you manage that? I think the most important thing is that you, rely on mentors and feedback to manage that failure. The worst thing you can be is to start becoming either discouraged or defensive. And so the great plus about our field is if you fail, there are ways to get advice or feedback on what is causing that. And I would say value that feedback. Don't take necessarily everything as truth either in the feedback you receive, but the approach you have into saying, I failed for those reasons, maybe this I think are good, this maybe are not truthful, but why did it go that way and how can I improve it? And if you set your mind that way, so maybe be angry for an hour and then that's it, you move forward. I think that's the best thing you can do, and know that as in every other career experience or aspect of your life, there are good things and there are things that simply don't go the way you want. It's not in any way a reason for which you should abandon what your passion is. This is how I view it.
Thank you. It was very helpful.
Other thoughts on that question?
I would say thank God for failures for making progress. Without failures, no one would have made any progress. We would still be fighting the Neanderthals. So I think as Alessandra said very well, it's use every failure as an opportunity to learn something, and don't get discouraged. And that's how people make progress. Nobody has done anything and has worked immediately. Yeah. I've never had that experience.
Thank you.
Me neither.
It's an interesting perspective because a lot of students that go into a faculty position have been the best in their class, and they've always done well in their classes, always been, and then all of a sudden they get into a faculty position and
Exactly.
things
I was gonna say-
aren't so easy.
Yeah, I was going to say, because usually students, are obviously very successful going through this, everything they do, and they immediately see the result as a positive things and so on until they get to research. And then when you get to research, then you notice, they have follow this approach, it get a dead end. Follow that approach, they get a dead end. And that, as Linda and Alessandro said, we learn from those things. And then that would add to our experience and knowledge. But also specifically about the proposal that Alessandro mentioned, no matter whether you're the early career researcher or the senior researcher, you put a lot of effort on the proposal and you may get a negative answer. Yes, I mean, yeah, it is disappointing, but then just you move on. You learn from that, you move on to the thing. So believe me, I mean, senior researcher, early career researcher, when we write proposal, sometimes we get no, sometimes we get yes answer.
Sometimes, you see, many times. You should not say sometimes.
I didn't want to scare them, Linda, so that.
No, that's okay. No, if they cannot get no, they are not in the right profession.
Exactly. That's exactly right. In other words, it's part of the job. I mean, you do this, but as Linda said, this actually is a good motivator. Yeah. I mean, you do that, you write the proposals, you may spend, several weeks, months, to write, many 100 pages of proposals, and then you get the answer and you're not selected. We learn from that. If you can get a feedback from reviewers' comments, that's always helpful, based on that, you try to do it, next time better and so on. And eventually you get it. But, that's part of the profession. And any profession has this thing. It's not just unique to us.
Well, especially faculty though, then now, because if you are in industry, and especially in industry, the proposal writing is done in a different way, all right? Usually they go in groups, but as a faculty member, you are on the front line in terms of the proposal. So you may get many more no's because a lot of times you will go individually.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And if the chance of getting yes is 20%, that's a good chance.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's an awesome chance. But I think also the ability to turn those failures into something that you spin in a positive way, it's really something that whoever is giving you a job is seeking for. They don't want people that will lock themselves in a corner depressed because failures will happen. So how do you react to that? And your ability to do that and keep motivating yourself and others is a very valuable skill you can develop. You need to get trained, so you fail and you get trained.
Yeah. Let me just add some point, by the way, specifically about the proposal, particularly if you're putting a team together to write a proposal. Of course, it takes a lot of effort. You put a big proposal team of, 5, 6 faculty members putting together, and then you get a negative answer. One of the interesting things that's come out of that is you already started dialogue with 5, 6 faculty members, even though you may not get that proposal funded, but that actually is the basis behind the collaborations. And that inevitably gets rise to interesting interaction that may lead to other proposals in the future, and then you get it. So that's another interesting way that we can learn from these types.
Yeah, strongly agree with that.
Great. We have time for one quick question. We're just about to the end of our time, but Tianlin, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead and ask if you would.
Oh, I think that was the last question. So.
Oh, okay. Your hand's still up. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I really want to take a moment on behalf of all of us. I know it's kind of hard to clap on Zoom, but I know that I'm very appreciative of the panel and all that the wisdom you've imparted to us today. And I see some hands clapping, and we really appreciate your time and expertise and benefited from this greatly. So students, thank you for participating, and everyone, I'll turn it back over to Sembian.
Yeah, may I also thank you all, the panelists. It was a great session, and Charlie, great moderation, and the students, you had a great opportunity to hear some outstanding scholars today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Students.
Thank you.